Hello, Abhishek.
Hello, Sushma. Welcome to the first Not a Wisdom Jam. Uh, I am happy to maybe introduce you in a line, Sushma,
Yeah,
and then pass it on to you.
yeah.
See, the one line I want to introduce Sushma in is that the first time I saw your profile, I noticed the fact that you have been facilitating since before I was born. I'm like, I want to meet this person who has been facilitating for longer years than I've spent all my lifetime. And that was the first time I was like, let me show up for that. And I mean, all these years, all this experience, all this wisdom, it's really a privilege to be on the other side with you and to inaugurate the Not Just Wisdom Jam, a format where I find myself on the other side. So over to you, Swift.
Thank you, Abhishek. By introducing me like that, you are reminding me, oh, I've been there on this earth for a long, long time. But I came up with this idea because um, I have experienced you as a person who really reflects things and has wisdom beyond his years. And therefore, I thought it was not right, only you interviewing everyone. And I thought that I would like to interview you and let people know you as well. And this is not really an interview because we decided that we want to interact with each other. We want to have a conversation with each other around a couple of things that you're very passionate about, and I'm also very passionate about. Yeah. So I'm glad to be here and that we are talking. And so I think it's not going to be question kind of a process. Okay. But what I like to start with is that I have heard you talk a lot about culture, culture of an NGO, and how culture drives performance, culture drives the kind of values, the values drive the culture, both kind of things. And so I thought maybe you can start the talk with that as to what the meaning of that for you has been in all these years. Because for me also, working with organizations, I first look at the culture and the values that organization has. So that's why I thought that it would be a nice idea to start with that.
Thanks, Sush. Culture is love. For me, culture is really about love, an excuse to love, I guess. Because I think the reason I took up culture as my life's work or my current life's work was that on one end, I was looking at my own churning, my own experiences with mental health, my own struggles. And on the other hand, as a behavioral scientist, I was looking at people very closely. And so these two combined for me to feel a great love for people and a deep desire that may every person thrive, may every person be really flowering to their full potential, like may God bless every person. Now, when I looked at people individually, they seem to be perfect, like quite nice, and
Yeah.
in the right conditions, each person is a flower. But when they got together, तो गड़बड़ शुरू होने लग रही थी. So like, this is the real problem to solve. How do we coexist? And I think coexistence has been humanity's problem since time immemorial. We just don't get along, in spite of independently being very good. Like in our own heads and worlds, we are saints. But the moment you put any two people together, even in a marriage, even as siblings, so to me, culture is really, when I say culture is love, it is really coming from how do we exist with each other in a way that we honor each other's boundaries, we honor each other's potential, we work in a way that allows each other to thrive. And so, yeah, so I think for me, culture became a way in which we could get everybody to rise together collectively, not just individually. How do we make the collective grow and thrive? So yeah, so I would say culture is my excuse to express my love for this work, for organizations, for people.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting because Edgar Schein has done so much work on culture and organizations and leadership. And he also talks a lot about, the intimacy and the deeper relationship and not just a transactional piece. And so when you talk about that it is culture is all about love, I think it's an interesting definition that you are coming up with. And to me, I think also the point that you're making is that when people come together collectively, somewhere the competitiveness or the dynamics of that interpersonal space becomes more pronounced, and they forget the love that they hold for each other or the common values that they hold for each other. And to me, therefore, this process of coming together and then becoming an individual and my needs becoming more important rather than our needs. So I think, and that is what defines the culture, why this kind of thing is happening. Because to me, because it's a culture is competitive, culture is outcome driven, then naturally they are encouraging the competitiveness or individualism. That's how I perceive.
Yeah. In fact, I also want to add, Sush, that I want to distinguish because also love is such a broad term, but really some flavors particularly stand out when talking about culture for me. So one is the whole spirit of Maitri, noble friendship. That okay, here is a bunch of people stuck in an organization, stuck with a common purpose. Ab saath mein hi chalna hai. So we can walk as friends or we can walk as competitive enemies. So one is Maitri, the spirit of Maitri. The other is metta, the spirit of loving kindness. That I as a human being, I wish the best in you as a human being come out, and can I have that loving kindness cultivated, right? And the third for me would be shraddha, faith that in walking towards this higher purpose, we will create something, right? And these are all expressions of love for the purpose, love for each other. Uh, and the interesting paradox I feel is that while people put their needs ahead, their real needs get met only when they honor the other. I may have a need of being seen, but seen by whom? Seen by others. There needs to be an other for my needs to be met. And in overly getting obsessed with my needs, I disconnect myself from others. Then I look for intimacy. Then I find emptiness. Like the whole drama begins. So to me, it's a paradox that creating hyper competitive cultures actually leads to more emptiness and more deficit, and then unhealthy ways of filling that deficit. So ये सब drama bypass करके how do we more सहजता से with more ease how do we flower? So that I think is
Yeah, I think how may come later as a how do we manage this, because plenty of time I have read somewhere it's not that we drive the culture, but the culture drives us.
Definitely.
So to me, when culture drives us, then it is almost like in our blood.
Yeah.
In our genes, whatever is going on, whether it is a family culture or it is an organizational culture or it is a societal culture, whatever it is. And also it's interesting that when there is a disaster happening, at that time, everybody comes together. Especially if it's a natural disaster, like COVID time. There are a lot of people helping each other. At that
Yeah,
time, the love for people was driving them to be sensitive to each other and to be very, very, because they were being very vulnerable because of the circumstances.
true, true.
So that brings me to another process that, maybe when we stop being vulnerable, that's when we stop being sensitive and therefore are not able to see the needs of others and how collectively we can come together. What do you think?
I mean, I think when I make somebody else's pain my own pain, uh, in some way I feel I expand.
Yeah.
Even though it may seem very painful and we're all very sensitive, and I feel we all shut ourselves to protect ourselves, but in that shutting is also a disconnection. And when I open myself to feel one with the other person, feel one with their happiness, one with their sadness, that interconnectedness has this intimacy you spoke about. That you realize that, human to human, our experiences are not as different either. Like pain is pain, whether you're feeling it, the other person's feeling it. And in fact, I think, Sush, I'm reaching this conclusion that the human experience is fairly challenging for each of us, with all our struggles and all. And a lot of this is private because people are not vulnerable. Deep within
Correct.
each of us is struggling, but it's almost shameful to share, I am struggling. I want to show my own confident, happy face, put it on social media and show. And it's almost like a mask party, masquerade. Sab log mask pehan ke aa rahe hain. And vulnerability is really unmasking and saying, boss, I don't know. And it's tough. And I am brave. Tough doesn't mean I want sympathy. Tough means I'm dealing with it. And just as you're dealing with your struggles and we're one in our struggle. So there's something about this vulnerability piece. And I've struggled and I've learned a lot about vulnerability from you. I've learned a lot about being bindas, saying, ha, mushkil hai, nahi samajh mein aa raha hai, but not bring ego in between. Like it's not a judgment on me because everybody struggles, everybody, yeah. So I think when more people start doing that, the atmosphere, the culture of that space starts shifting because then it becomes a brave space. It's easier to be brave when others are vulnerable, and it's easier to be banavati when others are banavati.
Yeah. So, which also brings me to two other factors. So, one is the psychological safety. Because plenty of time there is no psychological safety, so therefore we are not vulnerable. And the second piece is really about trust, trusting self and trusting others. Because if I'm operating from control and fear, then or anxiety, then my ability to let go or to trust the process is very low.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So it becomes like a chicken and egg. So we create a culture which is seething or very palpitating with fear.
yeah,
Everybody, as you said, everybody then holds back and is shrinking spaces
yeah,
instead of expanding and embracing whatever is emerging.
yeah. बिल्कुल. ऐसे में फिर people stop being playful. Like I think, and just I don't know why we forget to play. Then as children we played, we experiment, we take risks, we do things. और फिर ये जो डर बैठ जाता है, which hijacks our limbic system, we become very conscious, judging, and if you're able to transcend that, on the other side is a playful, creative, self-expressive individual who creates something so beautiful in the world. And just such an individual is such a joy to watch. Okay, here is an individual in their true self-expression who's shining without any hesitation. And I feel that's possible for all of us simultaneously. I just one thing I wanted to say was that there is this myth that only some people can succeed or only some people can get attention. I think that's a very scarcity mindset. I think there is enough for each of us to flower, to be unique, to shine. और ये one hero story से मुझे तकलीफ है because it de-heroizes everybody else. I think each of us can be special and have our own, our own footage, our own flowering, and it can coexist.
Yeah, that's a actually beautiful imagery, because that's the possibility, you know, and I operate from that possibility. But if you really look at the way the patriarchy works, the gender processes that happen, the kind of expectations people have, so then all that is what is making me who I am. I'm constantly in a shrinking space rather than because what will others say, what will people say, how, because what is the criteria of success, all this kind of um, nonsense that is filled in our head. So that what is required is that courage to be me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I love Adler's book, which is called Courage to be Disliked.
Yeah.
So, but to have that courage to be disliked, and therefore that means to own my unique self.
Yeah, yeah. I think and patriarchy is a topic. I mean, I have a lot of passion for the topic of gender. I've thought a lot, but I have two confessions. I'm going to make two confessions
Yes.
on, if I can, on patriarchy
Of
and
course, I would
culture.
love to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. The first confession is patriarchy pits man against man, because unconsciously, as a man, I find myself thinking in hierarchies, placing myself in a hierarchy, gauging who's up, who's down, how do I move up, and in this competitive one-upmanship with other men, what I had missed in the past was a true brotherhood and
No.
a true coming together of men as one collective band out there to make a difference. And patriarchy robbed me of the brotherhood. And it is only after I was able to decondition from the patriarchy, I found a true brotherhood with every other man saying, guys, we're in this together. तो एक तो वो कन्फेशन है कि ब्रदरहुड चोरी हो जाता है पेट्रियार्की से, बट वो रिक्लेम हो सकता है और ऐसी एक जगह है जहां men need not be alpha males and can just be brothers, can be together, and that energy as a man I need so much of, and I never knew I needed that energy, the energy from other men.
Yeah.
So that's one confession, and I think romance is one of the best discoveries I've had. It's a very delicious form of romance. The other, Sushma, is that as I'm becoming an older man, I find the winds of the society moving in my favor. And I feel to some extent it's because there's an implicit trust of the older man in our society, because we've seen fathers be in charge, we've seen
Yeah.
older men be in charge. And the way patriarchy plays out, there is one that I was saying the same things 10 years ago as I am now, but somehow it's coming from an older man. And so it sounds more legit. And when I look at women of a similar age, somehow I feel they have to struggle harder to get their point across. Uh, and maybe it's gender, maybe it's not, I don't know, but I have a gut feel that some of it at least is gender playing out in terms of feelings of insecurity, that just being able to look at each other as human beings at one level, and at the other level being sensitive to gender. How do we do both? That samne insan bhi hai, and yet I guess as a man I have struggled to understand male privilege, because what I can understand what it is to be a woman only in abstraction, like I've never been a woman. So I can
Yeah.
only hear stories of how a woman's carrying a key in a dark lane so that agar koi aayega to mere haath mein chabi hai marne ke liye. I'm like, this experience is unavailable to me. And I think patriarchy really rigs the game in the favor of men in a skewed way, in a disconnected way, not in a healthy way. So I think, yeah, those are all. I think patriarchy, जैसे एयर कंडीशनर होता है रूम में, पता नहीं चलता है पर रूम का तापमान उससे ज्यादा, आई थिंक patriarchy is like an air conditioner in the room. It is there and we have to be very sensitive to see how it's playing out.
I agree with you, because this whole business of under the garb of respect, people demand and have a lot of expectations, both from women and men. You respect the age, and respecting means you don't disagree. Respecting means that you don't raise your voice. Okay? So and to share with you that, I personally have never experienced, even when I started as a consultant, I must have been the very young woman. There were hardly any women at that time in the field. But somehow, while it took me first half an hour or 1 hour to uh, to to share my own assertiveness or my own stance, who I am. But after that, I've never experienced people, um, creating any differentiation about me, or if there was a man around me and them talking to the man rather than me. I have not gone through that, which I hear a lot of people go through it. Maybe because it was the way I was and the way I confronted. And I think I was even more um, bindas at that time to question some of these things. Because I think my own culture has been to thrive on some of the books that I've read. And therefore that created the picture of, I never thought myself different in career or anything than men. I thought both of us are the same. So what I'm saying is that somewhere in the way we are bringing up children today, patriarchy becomes like as a given. Then it takes years for women and men to come out of it. They have to go through therapy, through self-awareness pieces, and still somewhere they remain stuck. So to see each person blooming and flowering and to glowing in their own and each person bringing their uniqueness and being included. But today we are really talking about inclusion and diversity and all. To me, many times it's just a lip service. In reality, how do we listen to each other? And what kind of a value is the person visible really to me? And does that person feel visible to me? Does he or she feel that she's being seen by me? This word seen by me is a very important process because plenty of people won't talk about it. So they make a lot of assumptions about a culture, the unsaid. So, but I'm with you that these efforts have to be made to come out of this kind of conditioning. Because if you really want cultural change, because even after working for an organization for 40 years, just now I'm quite impacted by Edgar Schein. So he said that he could not change the culture. Although he worked with one organization for almost 35, 40 years. At the end, he admitted that he couldn't change the culture. Okay. So therefore, what do you think? That can culture be changed? And if yes, then how do we work on that?
Deep belief that cultures can be changed. I feel this is how I think about it. We're all playing a game, or there's a collective story we believe in. And there are times in the organization's journey where everybody wants the game to change, but nobody is able to change it because the rules of the game are invisible. And if you make the rules of the game visible and tell people that the only reason these rules are in place is because you're cooperating with these rules and there's nobody else from outside who's coming and changing these. What is going to change is just a collective agreement for you all to shift the game. And I really feel that when human beings see it and they see their own agency, they see their own collusion, because I feel we collude with reality to create difficult conditions for ourselves somehow because we don't want to take up the responsibility of the way things are. So very convenient to blame and crib and very hard to take agency and shift. But when that shift happens, I think collectively we are capable of huge transformations.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that was coming to me was, for some reason, we are not very generous with our care, consideration, trust, or even granting leadership to others. So for some reason, I just feel we keep it all locked in our hearts and keep very, very high bars. Like, I'll only listen to this person if they are like such an expert and care for me. And so for some reason, we've locked away that innocence, that playfulness, that experimentative part, which invites, which responds to invitations. And if we have to shift the game, we need to tap into that part, the adventurous, creative part, which says, let's try something different. Will everybody try? Because only when everybody tries does it shift the culture. And it takes time, a lot of times. But I really believe that human beings, the great untapped potential in human beings is the potential to shift our culture in leaps. And I think that's where we are stuck. In fact, I think humanity level pay, if we learn how to shift our culture in leaps, we'll evolve and make we'll make
Yeah.
huge strides. We'll make large strides.
Yeah.
So yeah, back to you,
Beautifully.
Adal Sarkar. Yeah, sorry.
You articulated it beautifully. And so the only thing in that is that um, while if you're able to do that, then it will really evolve into and transform itself into something else. So there's possibilities that exist. Um, but another aspect to the whole thing which blocks us is our Newtonian thinking. And therefore the whole fragmentation that we do, fragmentation of thought and feeling, logic and experience, and therefore this polarization, man and woman, this polarization that is taking place is almost defining the process. And therefore, holding this polarity together is something that we need to really learn. That it's not either or space. Okay, it is and. We need both. But somewhere we are so steeped in this, I would say, this nonsense about this and that, this or that, that, I mean, I have seen in some of the, so many of corporate meetings itself, the whole thing remains a debate and a discussion, but it doesn't become a conversation. It doesn't become a multi-log. So the style of conversation also defines the culture. So therefore, many of these building blocks will have to be shifted and changed.
True.
To really allow ourselves to experience the beauty of nature, for example, because nature is an example of living together and still blooming.
True.
And supporting each other.
Yeah.
That's what you're really also talking about, that how do we create a caring and supportive culture where you are not judging, but you are being sensitive to each other and our own shortcomings.
Yeah. I think just building on the and rather than the polarity, I think one of the takes I have is that there is an and, there will be gossip, there will be competitiveness. This whole search for an ideal culture itself is problematic because it's a thriving, evolving, complex adaptive system, if I have to use that language. And this whole fossilizing an idea of a culture and then whipping this culture to become that culture, and the violence of that and the manipulation of that and the seduction of people to behave, it's a whole set of problematic ways of working with culture. For me, the world of energetic fields, the world of how attention is flowing, the world of appreciative inquiry that I've learned from you. To me, culture work is very subtle. It's a lot about energy, about attention, about uh, being mindful of how our perceptions are shaping our responses, and really this whole idea of connection between all of us, right? Just I think the future will look at our present age and say, oh, that was an age where every person thought they were separate, ha ha ha, because they had all evolved from common ancestors. Their experiences were same. They were breathing the same air, but for some reason they were stuck on the idea that they were just only distinct and separate. But that's just a part of the truth. Interconnection is also a part of that truth. And I think the polarity that you talked about for me is I want to hold my individuality, my uniqueness, but not at the cost of my interconnectedness. And when I'm able to hold those two together, I am unique and I'm connected to you. And to that extent, there's oneness. I think to me, there's something in that we're able to transcend this whole tug of war, that over collective which pushes my identity to the background. वो भी नहीं चाहिए, but बहुत individual हो गया तो connection छूट गया, वो भी नहीं चाहिए. So I think there is what you're saying. There's something. If you get that balance right, the energetic field shifts. The point where we are able to hold the polarity, you shift to a different energetic field altogether, and you're playing in almost a different world. And I have seen it happen. I think it happens in two people, in groups. वो flow हो जाता है.
Yeah. So I think what I like is that if we don't use the word culture and we pay attention to energy, and therefore what kind of energy is happening and what kind of connection that are taking place. Some of the African cultures have that, so they sit in the circle. At that time, there's no hierarchy there. And this is what we try to do also in our tea group process, somewhere that there's nobody who's higher in a circle. I may be facilitating, but that doesn't mean the others can't facilitate. So I think this possibility of, if we are taught and try to sort of focus on how to read the energy, and when energy shifts, that may be the moment when some amount of individualism is creeping in. You can feel the stuckness of the energy, in the way people talk, in the way the energy flows. So I think this could be one of the possibilities to shift, because otherwise people feel very possessive about the culture. Rituals, artifacts, so they become almost at the cost of individual pain that you have to do, and that's how the whole thing starts. So to me, this process of energy could lead to more collective understanding. I'm not sure, but I'm just thinking aloud right now.
So in fact, if I have the liberty to, I will take the liberty of moving from a Newtonian to a more quantum way of looking at it. That when a founder or a person sets an intention in the universe, which is the purpose, the DNA of the organization, to me, that energy ripples out in the universe and brings people who are resonating with that. Funders, employees, customers. There's a field of resonance that is, we call it the organization, but those boundaries are false, because even a vendor is to some extent a part of an organization, a customer is participating. So there is definitely an energy field that reverberates from an organization and from the individuals. And there's, of course, individual energy fields, but when you go into the organizational energy field, that culture, that energetic field lifts you, especially if the culture is healthier, it makes you a better person. It's just almost like at home, you may not be as good, but when you show up for work, the energy takes you into a different world and you're able to perform differently. A different self comes out. and to be being sensitive to those energetic fields, and because they're invisible, we don't talk about them because they're very woo woo. You don't want to talk about energy because what is the measurable on energy, and it's a very shift. And I think now we are reaching the limits of this whole Cartesian Newtonian divided worldview, because that's what's ultimately manifested as polarization in our society. यहाँ पहुंच गए हम, ये डिवाइड करते करते इस जगह पे पहुंच गए, and we're realizing the limits of it. And to me, the jump into a quantum, non-linear, complex worldview would necessarily include energy and energetic fields, because that's really, and again, that's not logical. It's post-logic. It doesn't mean it excludes logic, but it's a lot of sensing, a lot of allowing other faculty to. So for culture, and again, I'm bringing it back to culture, saying that to do culture work, you need to go beyond logic, to use all faculty. And if a culture is healthy, it takes you beyond logic, not in an illogical sense, but in an expanded sense. And good cultures evoke that in us. They evoke the best of us.
Correct. Because to me, therefore, the whole idea around complex adaptive system is really based on three simple things. One is that what is the kind of container you create? What are the boundaries of that container? Both physical, emotional, and all intellectual. What is that container as a leader that you create? And what is your thinking? Because that's where the energy process happens. And the second part is, therefore, how do we facilitate the significant differences to emerge, to be talked through? Because that is what we are talking about, different perspectives being there. It's not either or. It's just a perspective. So, and that is what leads to transforming exchanges. So the whole process actually shifts on its head. And to me, therefore, it becomes an interesting, wherever I have done this work, I find that the interconnectedness and integration, like they talk in spiral dynamics, it's at a turquoise level of values. So where you are able to see the whole system, not only just the parts.
Yeah.
So and to me, this whole system, and looking at just the patterns rather than what you said and what I said, it creates a new space for conversation of a different kind.
Yeah. Definitely.
And if conversation changes, the culture changes.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so tell me.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead. You were going to say something.
I think what you shared in terms of the container, the differences and the exchanges, and I think for each of those, very briefly, I think in one sentence each, maybe, I think the container a leader creates has a direct connect to the intention, the subtle intention of the leader. And a lot of times leaders set up organizations not truly to serve, but maybe for their own ego, and just that clarity of intent and purity of intent. So that to me is the decisive factor of the container. The second is in terms of differences. To truly see them, we need to kind of turn on the lights of the organization, because most organizations work with a spotlight on the leader and there is a lot of darkness around.
No.
And if you turn on the light, you will see, oh, in this, there is also a grandmother equivalent who is illiterate but the wisest in the room. And here is a child who's saying the king has no clothes. Like, the organization has so many voices, but it's so lit so badly that those voices don't come out. So spotlight ko band karke night lighting jo hota hai, how do we turn that on? And the last thing is in terms of transformative exchanges, what you shared in terms of earlier, that respect doesn't mean disagreement, because transformational exchanges actually happen on the edge. Only when there is tension. When there's agreement, it's all nice, like, hey, and that's important that there is resonance. But the real tension is where something new gets born. And somehow we hate those tensions, but that's exactly where the insight lies. The insight doesn't lie in the coherence alone. So I think those are a few pointers I wanted to share.
Absolutely, because to me, the change or the transformation happens when you are at an edge. And this edginess is what makes you jump, you know. So plenty of times people are scared of the differences and the conflict. So therefore, we don't allow those kinds of disagreements to emerge. But the fact is that actually emergence of that will give rise to some new clarity.
Bilkul. Yeah.
So to me, therefore, I like the expression you used about the light, the spotlight on the organization. You know, which is what it means to me is that the shadows or the dark areas, they become visible to people. But if the spotlight is only on the leader,
correct,
then the rest of the people are the shadow.
Yeah.
You know, and the second thing that I see is that when it becomes a leader-led space, then the whole idea around shared leadership concept, you know, that goes for a toss. And that's when you earlier talked about up and down and therefore the power dynamics that happen. So then even power and leadership is infinite. But in our thinking, it is finite.
Yeah.
So therefore, we try to grab. And but I think if we were to, this whole concept of co-creation and co-evolving, if these words, although they have started becoming more common now, but as to how to make that happen, that we are really co-evolving.
Yeah. Bilkul. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll come back later. You say.
No, at the cost of making a tall claim, I would make the claim that leadership, as it's currently mostly seen conventionally, is a very unhealthy phenomenon. Unhealthy, of course, for people around, but the most unhealthy for leaders.
Yes.
Because a lot of leaders I've interacted with, so many of them are lonely, or they're like, imagine being on spotlight all the time and being seen like, oh, bechara leader. Of course, it's meeting some of the unmet needs of the leader, but those don't need to be met by the outside. Those need to be met from the inside. And so many leaders have found do not live balanced lives. You will see when you light up the ecosystem around them, there's somebody who's sacrificing, there's some healthy. So the current way of leadership is unhealthy both for those prima donna leaders as well as for a lot of others who make themselves smaller to the leader instead of fully glowing. I think one of my rebellions or one of my what I feel very fundamentally about is what you just said, that each person has a right to bloom, each person has a space for leadership, and it is possible to collectively lead where each person is a leader. And I'm committed to one of the reasons I do culture work. I think one of my deep commitment is to build shared power. It is to build a world where each person has their share of say, their agency, and some skin in the game, some kind of power. And I think that to me is the idea of a beautiful, thriving world where each person gets this. Why only a handful of people should have all the attention? Why only a handful? Each person has the space to shine, and your shining doesn't reduce mine. In fact, it gives me the permission and courage to shine in my own unique way. You know, and I remember one of the earliest times, Sushma, in the lab when we were in the lab, I was a participant and we were doing the up and down lab. And I took the risk because I felt safe to tell you that as a facilitator, I feel up vis-a-vis you. I feel protective about you. I feel you're down. And instead of getting angry or upset, you're like, oh, I find that very interesting. I'd love to explore that. And I was shocked by that response because I'm like, okay, here is somebody who doesn't consider this bad, but is evoking curiosity. That chal kya raha hai? And I loved that. There's something about that confidence that it didn't shake you and that up and down is not bad, right? Those are just positions. But I didn't have that understanding at that time. But I think So coming back, I think there is something about a world. There is a possibility of a world where each of us can bloom and shine and share the limelight, share the power, and take ourselves way beyond what one person in the spotlight, feeling unhealthy and pressured, would be able to do. So yeah, so something like that.
Yeah, I think, and to me, this is not idealistic. Unless we all don't passionately hold this point of view, it may be difficult to get out of our mindsets. But I think I've had many experiences when in certain ways, especially in a tea group, when everybody is changing, the whole process and the glow is different. Nobody feels higher or lower. It's only when we start to evaluate. Now, this evaluation is another process that actually pulls people down.
Yeah.
And I wondered always that, why do we need evaluation? As in appreciative inquiry, we say valuation. So what are we valuing about the person rather than evaluation?
Mm-hmm.
So I think if our language changes, it evokes different feelings. And therefore, when the different feelings are evoked and provoked, so automatically the flow and the spontaneity is much more.
True. I think the process you were describing, when people struggle, work hard, and are able to make a leap, see a transformation, to me that process really melts my heart. And that's, to me, that is witnessing evolution. To me, that's witnessing God in action. To me, the process of an individual rising beyond their limitations is so sacred and so precious, and witnessing it is so precious. Just seeing that happen is like, मुझे तो literally लगता है कि I'm seeing evolution happen. I'm seeing God in action. And I think for me, culture work is that happening not only to individuals but to a collective really shifting, it like I said, it melts my heart again and again, and I love my molten heart. Like मेरा दिल खुशी से भर जाता है जब मैं देखता हूँ वो होते हुए, and I'm like, wow, this is, that's why culture work, I so passionately feel about it, because I think I see that happen in people. And yeah, I mean, you've seen so many of these happen, and our eyes light up. We love the joy of witnessing that flower blooming, and yeah, so I think it's worth being fussy about culture, because you're creating a soil where so many flowers can bloom, and every flower blooming warms the heart. It makes me bloom a little more. Something about that interconnection of witnessing that and feeling full. Yeah, so I just thought I would share that. I'll come to evaluation, but this, I just felt like I should share this. It's so beautiful about the work we do, right, on a daily basis.
Correct. And as you are sharing, I can feel your love and passion flowing right now also. And it's the same with me, because to me, this work itself is very sacred. Because when you're doing this kind of work, I find my own intuition is at the highest level. It's almost like something is constantly emerging, which I had no control over. And what is emerging is really sort of connecting, because people can feel it's not something which is planned or strategic. It is something that is happening. It's like when you enter a river and the way the water flows all over you. It's something like that, So you are experiencing a different current of water and the waves, and and it's the same way I find myself when I write poetry. That one word comes to me, and I start to write. And when I write, then automatically it is almost like somebody else is making me write. It's not under my control. And you mentioned about I am not much of a God believer, but at the same time, I can imagine some higher power is at play,
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, because I am probably connecting with so many energies at that moment. And I'm just, so to me, this is the same thing that if we want to create a different world, then I think leaders, when they create the organization, they need to be, and you use the word intentional. And therefore, we talk about also the purpose of why we are creating and what we are creating and what we want. So, and therefore, it can happen then.
Yeah. 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 I
Yeah.
was, yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
I was also still present to this question of evaluation.
Hmm.
And, there's a fundamental void when I look at my own experience of evaluation, this fundamental feeling of worthlessness and then
Yeah.
wanting to be validated by others, and that endless search for the stamp from someone else. And then that's an endless process because it's a void that never gets filled unless I fill it from myself, from within myself. And I remember in one of our coaching sessions, I think this happened where what emerged was that I was looking for validation from people that I didn't even regard, because the people I
Hmm.
regarded already valued me, but that was also not enough. So here are people I'm judging, but I'm like, no, but they should value me. I will judge them, but they should value me. And this whole drama, I think, I don't know if it starts from childhood or what it is, that fundamental wound of worthlessness. And just being able to say to myself that I am worthwhile as I am and who I am. I don't need to be someone else. And even in our work at Blue Ribbon and other places, people just find it very hard to grasp the idea that they are valuable in and of themselves. They just feel they need to do something. They need to prove. And just it's a simple idea that you are valuable the way you are. Uh, just to internalize that idea, I think is so hard. And I think evaluation gets born out of just refusing to, yeah, that idea.
Yeah. So we are not taught from the beginning that I'm enough, but we are given the message that your doing only makes you enough. And it's not your being which is valuable. So to me, I think some of these kind of messages that keep coming, sometimes conscious, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes they're very visible, sometimes they're very invisible, but I take it like that, you know. So this whole business of validation from outside is it's like a hole in the bucket. It can never be filled. Whatever you fill, it is going to go out.
Yeah, yeah.
So I love that song, you know, there's a hole in the bucket, dear lives, dear lives.
There's a hole
With
in the
what,
bucket, and
and then says, with what shall I fill it? Dear Liza, dear Liza. You know, she keeps giving answer, but it's not enough.
right.
He'll find another loophole into it. And so to me, some of the cultures are like that. They are not enough.
Yeah,
You know? So nobody is enough. Even I have come across, even in my coaching sessions with some of the leaders who are doing so well, and yet they feel they haven't done well. It's very difficult to convince them that what you have achieved is fantastic, because nobody can convince them,
yeah, yeah,
because they refuse to see it from their own eyes. They refuse to feel it in their own bodies. So that's another piece that we are not supposed to feel very joyous about some of the things we do. You know?
Yeah.
So they say this is very childish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think, but these days I personally feel there are a lot of people who are moving into this direction as well. There is much more awareness of this. And so therefore the hope is that that will create more new kind of as they call brave new world, where the collective and the individual can exist together. And there's a joyful living in that sense. It doesn't become such a stress. In the end, anyway, we all are going to die. And what are the stories that we are leaving behind?
Yeah.
So somewhere our narrative also has to change.
Yeah. I think for me, I think the last thing that's coming to me is the idea that rather than thinking about the future as somewhere we will reach, how do we create a future in the present where this is already happening? And I feel this whole quest to reach an imagined future itself has its own problems. Vis-a-vis creating the future in this moment. Like in this moment, if you and I are in that space and connected, we're already birthing something that we'd like to see in the world. And I feel there's something about not waiting to get to the future, really creating the future right now. And I think the culture, the fuss about culture is instead of going somewhere ideal, वो यही यहीं पे वो बनाना और इसी वक्त वो बनाना, that to me is the heart of the work that I do.
Yeah, I don't believe in future at all. And I don't believe in planning or goal setting. So I believe whatever you imagine, you start living it now.
Yes, absolutely.
And so therefore that's what the high dream is all about, that we live in the moment. And so, for example, just now, I really enjoyed this conversation with you. And I felt that there's so much of resonance both of us have. And I'm very glad that we decided to do this. And how are you feeling?
Delighted. I mean, I tapped into my own flow and enjoyed engaging with you. I think the conversation went to places I didn't think it would, but I really enjoyed it, honestly. It was good fun. Good to be on the other side also once in a while.
Yeah. No, I'm very glad. I enjoyed listening to some of your ideas and building together, really. So thank you. I think this is
Thanks a lot,
our
Sushma.
1 hour is over.
Yes, it's up, and I'm going to pause the recording and the live streaming. So thank you, everybody. Thank you there.